Welcome back to What You Will Learn. My name is Adam Ashton.
And my name is Adam Jones. Today we're doing our final review for the year. It's a bit of a celebration and it's a happy new year for everybody listening right now. And cheers, Adam Ashton.
Oh, cheers, mate. Hopefully no one listened to the How to Control Your Alcohol episode.
Oh, fuck.
Because we're off it. I'm getting back on, though. In a couple of days, I'm back on.
Back on back on, you mean off it, right?
Back off the alcohol, yeah. Back on the
We need to read the book again. So anyone who read that book and quit, stay quit.
Yeah, congrats. It's a bloody good book, and it's, get off the alcohol. Actually, unrelated, I saw a tweet. Someone said drinking in 2019 is like smoking in 1999. Ooh. I think it's true. I think in a few years, everyone's going to get woke to the fact that alcohol is pretty fucked.
Well, the benefits for you were very big, and for me as well. When I quit, I've quit for 1 years in a row.
Yeah.
And the benefits of that are just absolutely astronomical compared to the benefits of drinking. I think, right now I'm telling myself there's some upside for the social element, but...
That's a lie, mate. That's the pitcher plant talking.
Yeah, fuck, all right. That's good.
For anyone who hasn't listened to a best of episode before, there's been a lot of new listeners the last 6 months, which is great. A quick overview. This is our best of 2019, which is basically the best of season 4 so far. So from July through to December, for the first half of the year, we covered that in the best of season 3. What we do is our respective top 10s, Adam Jones's top 10, Adam Ashton's top 10, and like a 3 to 5 minute little summary of the best bullets of all of those books.
Yep. And then at the very end, I think we're going to do a bit of a duke it out, because it is a bit of a battle. Our top 10 is quite different this year. Now,
I think every year the top 10s get more and more different.
Yes, that's interesting. And we've got a different definition of what a good book is.
Yeah. So stay tuned. There's a war coming in about an hour and 10 minutes. A few things that we want to mention as well before we get started, given this is probably like, if this is one of your first episodes, obviously it'll give you a good recap of the last 6 months of books, but also it's a bit of self-congratulations, a bit of masturbation at the start for anyone who's stuck around for a while. So there's a bit of rambling before we get stuck into the top 10. But if you want to skip the rambling, maybe skip forward 3 or 4 minutes and then we'll get started with number 10.
Yeah, I think the way we've changed over time, and this season more than ever, it's been more about what the best bit is from the best book. So we originally were toying with the idea of being a book summary podcast where we'd put our own spin on it. Now it's all about trying to look from the author's perspective and see what the point they're trying to make and do our best job of really putting that across to everybody listening. And this is the only episode really where we let ourselves go a bit and say what we really think about books.
It's been tougher. I feel like this season in particular, we're writing more and more and more before the episode. Like we used to write 3,000 words or 4,000 words. Now we're writing 5,000, 6,000 words in terms of preparation.
Much less, man. I think, if you think about season 1, there's about 500 words, I'd say.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a few dot
I didn't
points.
even write anything season 1.
Oh, you would.
I just held the book and like flicked through it as we went.
A whole bunch of shit.
Yeah.
But now, it's definitely tripled the amount of effort, the amount of hours we put in through episodes, gone through the roof. Yeah. Hopefully that's showing.
Yeah, and it's also like we're sort of getting more brutal as well with what doesn't get in. If there's like something that's like really good but it sort of doesn't fit with what we're going with, or it's like a good idea but not enough juice to support it, then it gets a ruthless chop.
So as you said, man, the listeners were stoked to like see the people listening's gone through the roof. It started out as the idea that if we help just like one person, then that's a massive deal for us, right? If like one person emailed us and say, hey, you help me with X, Y, and Z, then absolutely ecstatic. I think we've tripled or quadrupled in the last 12 months.
Do you want to give specific stats? Or?
We hit over 1 million downloads and there's about 140,000 people a month listening as well. So it's gone beyond what we originally thought it would be.
We were having a look before this, coming to the end of the year, obviously. We looked at December last year, December 2018, we had 43,000 downloads for the month. May this year, so about 6 months ago, the last month of season 3, we had 57k downloads, and then December this year we had 130,000, or we're on track for 130,000. So yeah, tripled up since 12 months ago.
More important than downloads is the reviews and the feedback we get, and I think that some of the feedback is emotionally increased over the last 12 months, which has been great. but also in the positive sense, but also in a bit of the negative sense as well. We've been slapped up a little bit by reviews. I'd say of all the countries where we get reviews from, I think the US.
They're brutal.
Some of them love us, but some are absolutely brutal in multiple ways. One was saying, I guess they aren't for me. I couldn't get past the whale comment in the review of Atomic Habits podcast. I think in that episode I mentioned how... I went to the... it is my fault for that review. I went to the hot springs and there was a few very big people around. Mate, whoever reviewed it, what was the name? Maximus. I think it's objectively true. People in your country, the US, people in Australia, we're fat. We're objectively fat. And that was my comment. So I'm not backing away from my comment in that episode.
Yeah, for sure.
They need to read Atomic Habits and get fit.
Mate, I've got another 1-star here. This is from Gandalf 3 in Great Britain. And Gandalf 3 says, woefully poorly read, 1 star. The hosts know far too little to be hosting a podcast about books. In 2 episodes, they get Somerset Maugham's gender wrong, then completely forget her name. Apparently it's a bloke. Then state that they don't know who T.S. Eliot was. He was, quote, probably a good artist. Then go on to quote him talking about his poetry. Basically, general knowledge that anyone with a passing interest in the world of letters would know is beyond this podcast. So Gandalf basically says, fuck you, mate.
Mate, what do you got to say to Gandalf back?
Mate, I'd say to Gandalf, I think that's kind of the point. Like, we're not like phenomenally well read in terms of Somerset Maugham and T.S. Eliot, and we're not reading poetry and the great classics. I probably don't give a fuck about those people in all honesty.
Yeah,
I think
me too.
We're just sort of like, we're reading, we're learning as we go. We're doing things that interest us. And, mate, apparently Somerset Maugham's a bloke. I thought it was a chick. So
sounds like
apologies
a chick,
to Gandalf.
Yeah, sorry, Gandalf the Great. There's a few other comments we got recently, and the people who, our favourite listeners, the ones who've been there from the very start, who's gone through the crap when we really sucked, and we were just, one of our old episodes when it was like the best of, we would just get really drunk and just, it'd be a horrible episode. But anyway, the people back then, I think the season 2 equivalent of this episode, I kind of spilled the beans on my whole story, my back story and everything, fully transparent. And part of that was how the manginas in my history, which I used to do around the world and all that kind of stuff. But only recently, there's been a lot of comments that we've been getting about the mangina story and when they're coming back for some people.
Mate, I don't know. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but you told me another story recently, which I hadn't heard before, about a party that you went to, which was the bottom of the barrel. Do you want to tell that one?
How recently did I go to this party?
No, this is a party a long time ago. This is back in your heyday.
Oh, no, it used to be
about this. You called it the scooch, how someone scooched past you. Is that potty worthy or is that too much?
Oh, jeez. You've mentioned it. Well, I think it's part of the story is in like how low I used to be when I used to be a little bit too wild. No, it doesn't get in, Ashton.
Okay, stay tuned for that at some point. Mate, we got a good email from Brendan from New Zealand, and Brendan said he just discovered us. He listened to almost every episode in 3 months. That's pretty serious effort. He listened to 200 plus episodes in 3 months, and we'd like to cheers to Brendan for some of his comments and some of his favourites and what he sent through there. That's pretty serious effort. 200 episodes, 3 months. Numbers, he's doing more than 2 a day. He's doing 2.5 eps a day. That's pretty serious going.
Yeah. Send us an email, Brendan. We'll send you any book you like out of those 200 episodes.
Oh, nice. That wasn't planned, but yeah, we'll go with that.
I've got to be careful with that. We did that in the Alan Carr episode, and we said we'll give you a free book because it was my favourite book and most impactful book of all time for anyone who emails us. And then we've got about 50 to 100 at least emails that keep flowing through. There's a lot of emails that keep flowing through about this free book.
I specifically remember you said that you would do it as well, not we.
Yeah. Well, I think we capped it at 10, but they keep on coming, so we'll be careful with that. So just the one book here.
Yeah. Cheers, Brendan. But we do seriously appreciate anyone who writes us a review. We read them all. Anyone who sends us an email, we read them all as well. It's good fuel to keep us going. We obviously look at the downloads, but more than just the raw number is anybody getting in touch to say that they liked it, or we've had a few nice Instagram messages recently as well. We probably got to get back on there.
Yeah.
Should we get stuck in?
We'll get stuck in. Ash, I've got to top you up, mate. I've finished.
Okay, yeah. Go for a top up, and then let's get stuck in the top 10.
You can finish yours, and then we'll top us both up.
Okay, enough preamble. Let's get stuck into our respective top 10s.
So there's a few honourable mentions that didn't make both of our top 10s. we've got a few juggernauts here that are absolutely huge books in the world, but I think
They didn't get in our top 10s.
they didn't really get in our top 10s. Freakonomics, massive book, probably one of the most popular ones of all time in Goodreads. Great book, I think. Didn't make the top 10.
Probably would have been 15, 14 for me, yeah.
Out of this season.
Yeah.
That's pretty low, isn't it?
I suppose it is. It was decent stuff.
We got Talking to Strangers,
Malcolm
Gladwell's.
I almost thought about squeezing it in at number 10 just for you.
Just to piss me off a little bit, because I'm not the biggest fan of Gladwell.
Talking to Strangers, admittedly, probably wasn't his best. I did like it a lot, but probably not his best.
And then Everything is Fucked by Mark Manson.
Sold a lot of books.
I don't think we have a hell of a lot to say about that one. It's probably not really an honourable mention, but it's just worth mentioning in the podcast just because it's such a famous book.
Yeah. Even Brene Brown, probably a bit stiff not to get in. Her book, Dare to Lead. Obviously very popular author, very popular TED speaker. She's got some great stuff. Dare to Lead, probably not as good as Daring Greatly. You had Daring Greatly in a top 10 or even probably like a top 3 in years gone by. But
well, Daring Greatly was a great book, I thought.
Yeah.
And then this one was a subset of Daring Greatly. Everything in Daring Greatly was in the same as Dare to Lead. So I think she was just, I think we said in the
just
episode.
wasn't as good, yeah.
But I think she was just trying to sell a whole bunch of new books with no additional content. Good content in general, but no. Sorry.
There's some of the ones that missed out. But the ones that got in, obviously, is the next books to come. Do you want to kick it off?
Okay, so we're going to kick it off, and this is number 10 for me. It's 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. This is a great book, isn't it?
It's a good book. It didn't get in my top 10. It was probably like one of the first 20 books I read, like before we started the podcast. It was a very, very early one I read, and I really liked it. The idea that a lot of people doing business, whatever they're doing, their idea is going from 1 to N. So they're taking an idea that's already out there and trying to improve it and make it better. So they're going from 1, it already exists, to N, which is some improvement on 1. But this book is all about something completely brand new. You're going from nothing, from 0 to 1.
Yeah, it's almost, it is invention from the very start. And the way to get there, which I really like, he opens with a question like, what is the most important truth do very few people agree with you on? Which is a very good question, I think. It's like, what's the thing that you believe in the world that no one else agrees? Because for you to take something from 0 to 1, it's something that's not conventional yet. And it's something that you see, it's your 0, the thing is that you're going to take to 1, which kind of leads to the second question, which is what valuable company is out there that is nobody building?
Yeah, if there's an idea that you think this is a good idea and everybody else agrees with you, it's probably already been done. Or it's probably not going to be that valuable because nobody else has really capitalized on it. The only way to truly go from 0 to 1 is to get something completely new that's Peter Thiel very much contrarian. So doing things that go against the grain that not many other people think or agree with you on.
And so that's my number 10. What about you, Ashton?
My number 10, Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield. The follow-up to The War of Art. So The War of Art was about how there's this something inside of us that stops us from doing what we want to do. There's this gap between what we think we can do and what we actually do, and that's what he calls the resistance. And the way to beat the resistance is to turn pro. And so this book was a deep dive, I guess, on the second part of the equation, on the solution part of that turning pro. Yeah,
it's the resistance is the thing that's really stopping you from reaching your potential. So it's a very big deal. Movie I watched last night, this just popped up in the brain, which is always a little bit dangerous, but Limitless, the movie with
Bradley Cooper.
I was about to say Ashton Kutcher.
I think just because you were looking at me, and Ashton came to your
I know
brain.
Ashton Kutcher came in the brain. It's clearly not him.
It sort of looks somewhat similar, I guess.
Yeah, I don't watch enough movies, obviously. But I think the difference here is like the resistance is Bradley Cooper, before he takes this pill, he's just sitting there, he's playing the basketball, looking at the screen, typing 1 or 2 words and then deleting it, not doing anything. And then all of a sudden he takes the pill and he's basically turning pro. He beats the resistance fully, and this is what the pill gives him, and turns into the most ultra productive person of all time. And I think that's what the movie's about. It's not about his IQ going up 100-fold. It's about removing the resistance completely, and I think that's the difference. That's the way I interpret it.
Mate, that'd be great if you could package Turning Pro into a pill and just take it. That'd be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not that easy. This resistance is deep inside us all, And the first book, War of Art, was all about the difference between the resistance and turning pro. This book, Turning Pro, really drilled into what is an amateur versus what is a professional. And it slapped me up a bit to read, and it's probably worth rereading. One bit I really liked is that professionals have two salaries. There's the financial salary, the money that you make from whatever you're doing, but there's also the psychological salary. So just by knowing that you're doing what you're meant to be doing, or that you're doing something on your own terms, you got to factor that into your equations as well. It's not just all about the money.
Yeah, definitely, man. If you're doing something that's your jam for negligible income versus something that's just maximizing purely financial income, it's probably not going to be the best decision long term for your own spirit.
Absolutely. Mate, my number 9 is coming higher on your list, so we'll hold on that. And your number 9 is coming higher on my list, so we'll hold on that. So, mate, your number 8?
Quiet by Susan Cain. What I really liked about this was talking about the upside of introversion. I am probably at the core an introvert who's learned some extrovert tendencies, which, has really helped me. But for a lot of people out there, if you consider yourself an introvert, it can seem really hard sometimes because our whole entire culture really values the extrovert ideal more than anything. If you go to like a Tony Robbins event, it's about slapping your chest and going out there and just taking on, speaking up in meetings, making moves, dominating meetings, public speaking, all this kind of stuff. There's not a lot of value shed on the introvert side of the equation that I think.
What I really liked about this book actually was probably more beyond the arguments, was more of a meta level of how she did it. So what she did at the start was setting up that introversion can be a good thing. And then she had all these studies about introverts that are, maybe if they're not talking, maybe they're thinking instead, which is a good thing. And she also set up that the world is all built on these extroverts that are going out there and dominating, but they're probably setting us up for failure, like the GFC and all this stuff. So she was sort of setting up at the start a bit of pacing and leading, saying that, look, introversion is good, extroversion is bad. But then what she did at the second half of the book was like, if you're an introvert, you can't just sit back in your corner at your desk typing away at the computer and expect to change the world. You got to realize that you need to take on some of those extroversion tendencies, get yourself out there, start public speaking, start talking to people, start interacting. So I like the pacing and leading of getting the introverts on side and then teaching them what they need to do to improve.
Definitely, man. There's some really big opportunities for introverts because on the one hand, what extroverts don't have, you already have at your core. Like extroverts are reward sensitive. So people like this seek rewards and they might, in the process of this, seek short-term gratification rather than long-term gratification. And you got things like this, but then the long term as well, if you take the best parts of the extrovert, then you're really going to have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think it was good stuff. Very important for introverts to read, very important for extroverts to read. And it's, everyone should read it.
I thought you were going to hit us with something a bit more profound.
No, sorry, mate. Too many fat yaks and Johnny Walkers.
Mate, so your number 8
My number 8, Eat That Frog
Yep.
by Brian Tracy. And so a simple book, 100 pages, hour and a half read, 21 ideas. I say it's probably 6 different ideas. You say it's probably 1 or 2.
Well, it is one. It's objectively...
It's one idea that is...
One idea, man, but it's a sick idea.
It's good.
If you take this one idea and apply it over the long term, it's probably one of the best things you'll ever do in your entire life.
Yeah, I think it's
a big call, but
that's, mate, you love saying that. There's a lot of best things that you could ever do.
I say it about a lot of shit, man. Best food, best drink, best holiday. Whatever.
But if you think of like $25, an hour and a half of reading, 100 pages, and you come down with some way to change you, this is definitely a good book to read. It's the idea that there's never, ever possibly going to be enough time in the day to do everything that you want to do. The list of things that you want to do is longer than the time you have available. So the frog is all about working out what is the most important thing to do. What's the biggest, ugliest thing? What's the thing you're going to procrastinate on? What's the thing that's going to really change your day, change your productivity, and do that one first?
Yeah, so in terms of frogs, you got different types of frogs. To take this metaphor a bit further, the tadpoles are the little kind of tasks that aren't too scary. They're easy to eat, and they're too easy. They're not that easy to eat in reality, but they're easy.
Swallow them down, yeah.
But relative to the big, pussy-looking, disgusting-looking frog that you don't want to eat, but it's going to be the most productive thing you do all day, you need to look at the ugliest frog of your day first. Every time you go in the office or the work site or anything, the thing you're going to procrastinate the most over is most likely the most important thing that you can possibly do. It's that weird, awkward kind of phone call to the person that you don't really want to, or the client you don't really want to talk about. But if you did that, it's probably going to make the biggest influence on your day relative to all the little tadpoles. Your natural tendency is to move toward the tadpoles. But if every day, if you look at the ugliest looking frog with the pus coming out of it perspective, then that's the one you should be focusing on.
Yeah, Brian Tracy says you got to resist the temptation to clear up the small things first. You might think you're being productive. If you've got a list of 10 things, you do number 7, 8, 9, 10, just knock them off. They're done. They're off the list. That's good. But he says that's really procrastination, getting away from doing number one. And so he says, the idea is that if you eat a live frog the first thing in the morning, that's the worst thing you do all day. So translating that to work, if you do your hardest task first, the day's already a win. The rest of that is just a bonus.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things in the episode, before it, I was trying to convince you to cut it out of the episode because it's fucking really nothing.
It's a different way of saying the same shit.
Yeah, the salami slice versus the Swiss cheese effect.
Mate, it's a tasty, very, very tasty sandwich.
Well, at the time, I was like, mate, this is nothing. This is bullshit. Doesn't deserve to get in the episode. But since then, it's come up in my brain that many times. It's actually good shit. It is the Swiss cheese effect. If you got a task and you just go hardcore at it for a couple of hours and not worrying about too much things, and then you then you finish it off a few days later, compared to the salami slice where you just do a tiny bit. It sounds like the same thing when you think about it.
Yeah.
But after you hear this episode, hopefully you realise that they're quite different.
Yeah, well, that's it. The Swiss cheese, you can imagine a Swiss cheese with a whole bunch of holes in it. If you go out there and just commit 2 hours and punch a hole through the cheese, and you've done 60% of the task, and the rest of the task is just little scraps, little crumbs you've got to clean up, that's pretty easy. The other way of doing it is thinking of it, obviously eating a whole sausage of salami is tough, but if you just chop it up into small slices, take it a slice at a time, you can get there as well. So there's sort of two ways you can look at it. You can either go hardcore, punch a hole in it, Swiss cheese it, and then the rest you just slice it up into little tiny pieces and eat that full sausage. Matt, there was a lot of different ways of saying the same. Like you talked about the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. You're talking about Swiss cheese and salami slice and one oil barrel at a time and eat the frog. Like they're all the same shit.
You got oil, elephants, salami, frogs. I guess it's just a fucking frog. That's what it comes down on it.
I think it is, yeah. I think read that and it just shifts you a little bit and you can probably be a little bit more productive.
Yeah, man. All right, moving on to number 7 now. Enough of Brian Tracy.
Yeah. Mate, that one wasn't yours, was it?
Number 7. It probably could have been, man. I thought it was a great book. Oh, sorry, Frog.
Frog, yeah.
Frog wasn't.
Frog wasn't.
The next one probably could have been, which isn't in my top 10.
So my number 7, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big by Scott Adams. So I thought this was pretty good. It was like 230 pages, a lot of short little chapters. Probably 30% of it was really, really good.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of it was a bit of fat in it and some of it really good. The thing I liked more than anything, and it was probably one of the highlights in terms of just content to take away from that anyone can apply in their career, is the whole idea of skill stacking. So there's 2 ways to go about things. Someone will read like a Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule, just focus on the one thing for 10,000 hours and you're going to become world class.
Yeah, like Bill Gates. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people. Like Big Billy, Big Billy style. But the other way to look at it, like Scott Adams style, right? Like he calls himself a big bowl of mediocre soup. He's got a whole range of different skills where he's not world class at, that he's spent 10,000 hours on. But if you add X, Y, Z skills into this soup, he actually is the best in the world in terms of this specific skill. Yeah. And I think this is somewhat everybody can really take on, whether you're an accountant, lawyer, engineer, creative, anything you're doing. If you add a certain amount of skills in your skill set of your soup, then you can actually become the best in the world at something.
Yeah, if you look at Scott Adams, he was the creator of the Dilbert comics. Just pretty simple comics, but he's been able to syndicate that to thousands of newspapers and magazines around the world. It's been going for over 20, 25 years. Scott says, look, he's not that good at drawing. It's just pretty simple doodles, but look, like he's good enough. And like he's not that funny. He's not the funniest guy in the world. He's probably not the funniest guy in most rooms he goes in, but he's funny enough. He's not that good at business, but he's got an MBA, so he's got enough of a knowledge about business. He's not that good at writing. He's not world class, but he's good enough. Basically, when you add all of these good enoughs together, he just slots into this nice little intersection where he's the best at the world at making Dilbert cartoons, and he's made a fuckload of money off that.
Yeah.
You see he's got fuck you money, which is what Nassim Taleb says. Fuck you money is if you can say, like, fuck you before you hang up the phone. Most people, like, if they get a shit phone call, they hang up the phone and mutter fuck you under their breath.
Yeah.
But fuck you money is just saying it before you hang up.
Well, it's a fuck you for a lot of things, right? Like, before you quit your job, before you do anything, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Fuck you. You get out, you have to worry about. But the best part about all this skill stacking, right? There are some skills that have more leverage than all the others. And there's some skills that if you learn them now, it's going to apply for the rest of your career and add to your overall soup to be more valuable than all your competitors. Because we're really competing against people in this sense of the world. And hit us with some of the.
Well, public speaking is a big one. If you add that ingredient to your soup, it becomes very, very tasty. That it's like a halo effect. If you see someone who's a good public speaker, they're confident, they can structure a sentence, they can talk without saying and and not stumbling the words and forming a nice sentence. They sound competent. They sound like they know what they're talking about. If you can tick that off your list, add that to your talent stack, then you're immediately better than the next person.
Well, I think you dropped it in this season when you first got your first job out of university, working for ANZ. You're a really shitty employee, weren't you?
I was a horrendous employee.
You sucked. Absolutely sucked. You probably...
Oh, yeah.
I remember having a coffee with you and you were leaving work at 10 a.m.
I was
to go to the gym. Probably the worst employee of all time. If
I was
to
often
be
doing
honest.
like 10 till 3, but included in that 10 till 3 was an hour and a half lunch break and an hour and a half in the gym.
Well, there you go. So objectively, you shouldn't have passed probation.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have been hired. You should have been fired and then thrown down the trash. But after your initial period with all the other graduates, you ripped out one of your public speaking presentations about some bullshit. And because you could stand up in front of everyone and you could do a spiel in front of an audience, they kept you on, and they probably would have loved to stay there for long, but they would have.
The shining light of the grad program. I was the future of ANZ, the next CEO.
So halo effect being they take one attribute of your skill set and then apply it to the rest of your skill set. So you sucked at everything else. Well, not sucked, but you didn't put in any effort.
I sucked.
Well, you sucked. And they just took your public speaking to apply for everything.
Yeah.
Mate, I've been experiencing this recently a little bit as well. I think in my industry, I'm not amazing, but I realized after reading some of these books, if you learn how to public speak, it's got higher leverage than anything. And because I've been doing a lot of seminars and presentations in the engineering and construction industry in Australia, those moments have had higher leverage than anything else. And no one really looks at all the other shit at all, the things they really should be looking at. So it's quite irrational. I hope they're not listening right now because I'll lose it all.
Matt, I'll give you a pat on the back as well. Last year, you decided, public speaking is something you want to improve at. So you went full growth mindset on it. You joined Toastmasters. You were going every week. You were practicing your public speaking. Compare that to most people who are in their office who maybe they think public speaking is good. Maybe they don't even care. Maybe they think they just got to stick it out and keep doing their work. Mate, you just leapfrogged them all.
Well, it's quite interesting. Like we look at an undergraduate degree, we'll spend 30, 40 grand, 4 years in that. And some of it completely not valuable at all. Compared to public speaking, where you could do every Wednesday for 10 weeks for 2 hours after work.
For free.
And you're probably going to equal what your undergraduate degree costs.
I love it. Mate, some of the other things that he said are just generic skills that anybody can add to their soup is an understanding of behavior and psychology. So if you read he says if you read 4 or 5 books, if you read Thinking Fast and Slow, Influence, Predictably Irrational, Win Bigly, which is his own book, of course, you're going to be so far ahead of other people just in understanding psychology and behavior. He says writing as well. If you can structure writing nicely, if you can do nice emails and do a nice report, just by packaging it nicely, it looks good. Design, presenting your work very well. Conversation, if you can hold a conversation, ask questions of people, talk to them comfortably.
Just to drop another book in there, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you haven't read it yet, it's an absolutely must read. Again, on this theme we're talking about now, to add to your skill stack. Very simple shit. In the first 3 chapters of that, throw the book out after 3 chapters and just read that and then just apply that.
Yeah, phenomenal. Mate, so that was my number 7, how to fail at almost everything and still win big. And obviously the big one there is goals versus systems, but we've talked about that a lot. Mate, what was your number 7?
Piss. And fill up.
Piss and fill up.
Okay, we just got back from our wee. we both chose the garden this time.
Pissed
I
in
went
the
for the
backyard.
garden, and then you followed me. Well, next door neighbour. We've had a few. Got a bit of a history with next door neighbours.
Man, this is a different next door neighbour. He was right there next to the fence, and he heard the piss sound hitting the ground, and he said, "Boys, have you got a toilet there, or do you have to piss in the backyard?" So anyway, we said, "Mate,
Well, I think it
Go
creeps
toilet
into
next
soil,
time.
and the smell kind of creeps into
I'm sure it does."
Yeah.
Mate, it wasn't as bad as the last. If anyone's, if you haven't heard that To Sell is Human,
Oh,
about 10, 12, 15 minutes in, it was a very, very funny incident with the next door neighbour.
almost got beaten up. We weren't as tough as we normally act. But
No, we bitched out there. But, mate, you're number 7.
my number 7 is Getting Past No.
I think this was number 9 for me. My number 9, your number 7.
Similar to the previous book, there's a lot of value to be received from $30 and 8-hour read. So negotiation is one of those things that we all have to do many times throughout our entire life. So most people, it's every single year when you do your salary negotiation. So if you do any investment into reading a book, when it comes to negotiation, it's got huge ROI.
Yeah, we did Getting to Yes in season 3, which was by Roger Fisher and William Ury. And then Getting Past No was only by one of them. I forget which one, but one of them got the snub. But Getting Past No, so Getting to Yes was about their principled negotiation versus positional bargaining. So the Getting to Yes, rather than both saying, hey, I want A, I want B, and then fighting it out from there, you take it to a high level and think, okay, you say you want this, but what do you actually want? What are the principles behind what you want rather than what are you saying you want? And then Getting Past No took it away from the argument and looked more about the interpersonal relationships. So it was more about, okay, you're having this negotiation. What is the personal side of it? What is the relationship side of it? How do you interact from person to person?
It's much more difficult to get past no than get to yes, because usually if you're trying to negotiate something that they disagree with, there's much more effort to get them across the line. A few of the things I really liked is because when you're getting past no and there's tension between what you want and what they want, step 1 of the 5-step process was don't react, and that's go to the balcony.
Yeah, if someone says, I want A, and you react and say, you're a bloody idiot, why do you want this? This is so stupid, you're such a fool for wanting this. That's very, very bad for negotiation. If you can take a deep breath, take a step back, rather than reacting straight away, and if you can compose yourself and come back to the principles, come back to the negotiation, come back to the good relationships, you're in a much better spot to negotiate.
Mate, I'm just going to whip out step 2 till 5 very quickly here.
Yeah, bang them out.
But step 2 is all about disarm them, step to the same side, because if you got a different opinion to them, step to their side, and from there, find out how you can get to a mutually beneficial destination. Step 3 is about changing the games. Don't reject, reframe. Similar to what I said, but if you're stepping to their side, you need to reframe the problem so you're solving the exact same problem on the same team
Bang, bang.
rather than butting heads. Step 4 is building the golden bridge. Mate, I really love this one. In any negotiation, you need to give them the opportunity. If you're going to win in this situation,
Make it easy for them to say yes.
make it easy for them to say yes, but also, more than anything, help them save face. If it's your manager speaking to their manager, find a way to let them go to their manager and make it look like they won.
Yeah, nice.
And step 5 is don't escalate, use power to educate.
Make it hard to say no. That's when you start to tighten the screws.
Use some of the screws starting to get a bit heavy. Yeah.
It's very good. And I feel like in combination, if you read, they said you can read either one, but I think if you read Getting to Yes first and then follow it up with Getting Past No, you get the ideas around principled negotiation, about the argument, and then talking about the personal side of it as well. So I think it's a good little double up reading those two back to back.
Number 6 for me is a hold. It's coming for you later.
Yeah.
Number 6 for you is a hold. It's coming later.
Yeah.
Number 5 for you, Grit.
Grit by Angela Duckworth. I have a lot of, I guess, hesitation around the research about, it was a very subjective 10-question questionnaire to evaluate your grit score. So I've got a lot of hesitations about the grit score and the research method itself. But what she said was that, she tested She tested the students in the West Point United States Military Academy. The people with the highest grit scores stuck it out. The people with the lowest grit scores quit. She tested school kids doing the spelling bee. The ones with the highest grit scores were the winners. The ones with the lowest grit scores were the quitters. She found that grit was a good indicator of success. So whilst it's probably a little bit subjective, grit is it's a mixture of passion and perseverance. And I think the actual method of growing more grit, I think, was very, very strong.
I think this was a great book from the point of view. It really took some of the core research of books like Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi
nice.
and a few of those other ones, and really
Deliberate
packaged
practice, Anders Ericsson,
exactly
mindset,
all that kind of stuff. So some of those foundational books really packaged into one book about how to get to grit. And grit being a very big indicator about if you're going to take something on and succeed from it, or if you're just going to back out and quit something before you actually reach some level of success. So grit being it's a very big thing, man, isn't it?
Yeah, she talked a lot about talent, people who are looking for talent, people who are hiring for talent, people who rate talent as the most important thing. What she said is talent is more like a multiplier. Talent is how quickly you can get good at something, but talent is useless without effort. So she says talent multiplied by effort equals skill. Skill multiplied by effort equals achievement. So if you've got zero effort, you get zero at the end, zero achievement. So if you can apply effort throughout all of this process, you're going to go from talent to achievement very quickly.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Without effort, you're really not going anywhere.
And that's what grit is all about. Grit is sticking it out, not quitting, putting in the effort. Even when times get tough, you're gritty, you're sticking it out, you're putting in effort.
Moving on to number 5. So this was number 6 for you. Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. The first kids or the children's book we've really covered in this podcast. But it really represents a lot of incredible messages for you as a kid, but also for anyone listening as an adult. If you read it, I think it's not quite tears. If you got a scale between 0 to tears, it takes you to 73%.
Man, so this is the book I've read the most times, but given it only takes about 7 or 8 minutes to read, it's not that much of an accomplishment. But I think it's a phenomenal book. I had it at 6th spot, you had it at 5th spot. I probably could have even bumped it up a few notches as well. I think it's phenomenal.
We'll whip out a few of the parts of the book. The first, I think, lesson we got from it was being proactive and choosing where you want to go. This is a very big thing that I think a lot of the population doesn't really understand fully. So if you get this as a kid, hell yeah, you're on for a winner. But what it says is you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can see yourself in any direction you choose. You're on your own and you know what you know, and you are the guy who'll decide where to go. Oh, the places you'll go.
Man, that's pretty sick. You do have brains in your head, you do have feet in your shoes. Basically, you can decide what you want to do, and then you've got the feet to take you there. I think a lot of people probably just follow the herd. They probably just go with what their parents told them, what their teachers told them, what their bosses told them. But you've got your own brain in your own head, and you can make decisions for yourself. And then more importantly, you've got the feet in your shoes. You can actually start walking in that direction.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing it says is it's opener there in the wide open air. It's kind of like a call to action for you to take the call to adventure, just go on a new adventure, a new challenge, take on some dragon that's just sitting out there for you to take on and take on the pot of gold. Don't just follow this herd and just do what they're doing. Go out there and try and do something new that's difficult.
Mate, one other page I liked was the page about the waiting place. Most people are headed for this most useless place, the waiting place. That's where people are just waiting. They're waiting for a train to go or a bus to come or a plane to go or the mail to come or the rain to go or the phone to ring or the snow to snow or waiting around for a yes or a no or waiting for their hair to grow. Everybody is just waiting. And the pictures on this page were phenomenal as well. People just waiting in line and the line's leading nowhere, or there's one dude fishing and everybody's just watching him fishing. Most people I think are just waiting around but not really heading towards where they want to go. They're just either watching other people doing their thing or they're just waiting in line and the line's leading them nowhere.
Yeah, man. My niece, Ruby, she's 1.5 years old, just waiting for the right time to give her this book. When do you reckon it is? 3?
I don't know. When do kids start reading? I don't know.
Fuck, I've got to figure this out. Because I've got to find this right moment to just read this book to her where she gets fully Slapped up's not the right word for a 3 or 4 year old. It's a word we use, but
I think it's good
metaphorically,
as well.
the equivalent.
It's good to read as a kid, but I think it's even better to read as an adult as well.
Like I think it's 20 more for adults, man.
Even the
if I read that as a 3 or 4 year old,
you wouldn't get it. You'd laugh at the little funny birds in the drawings and the big monsters, but
it's like a good red wine. It matures with age.
Yeah,
I think like 60 or 70 year olds would get the good slap up from it.
Mate, Seuss is phenomenal. I remember when I first read this, actually my mum gave it to me. And then after that, I bought like all of Seuss's like higher level books, not like the little kids' books, like One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, but all like the good ones, like the Lorax. Like the Lorax is fucking sick as well.
We're going to drop the Lorax, you reckon?
We tried to do the Lorax, 2.5 years ago. We just couldn't do it, but maybe we can do it now.
Yeah, we'll give it a crack.
Mate, so that was your number 5, my number 6. I feel like now I wish I had bumped that up higher actually, but we'll go with that. Mate, what's your number 4?
4 for me is Homo Deus, which I think it didn't get into yours at all. But
it didn't get into. It's probably like number 11 or number 12 for me.
But it's a very big deal because throughout human history, we've always been worried about the same few things. Right? It's hard to remember right now. Like we've got quite an interesting circumstance in history where we don't really have to worry about the bullshit that people did for the hundreds of thousands of years through evolution, where the whole time Big Yuval Noah Harari was saying.
What was that? Say that one more time.
I think it was a few of the Johnnies speaking then, not necessarily AJ. Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah,
how's that? You happy with that?
So big Y and H. We did Sapiens. We did 21 lessons for the 21st century. So Sapiens was about the past. Homo Deus is about the future, and then 21 lessons is about the present.
So for those like few thousand, hundreds of thousands of years, imagine waking up look, in 10,000 BC. You got 3 things to worry about. You got famine, plague, and war. So there's a real possibility that you might actually die of hunger. You might die of plague. There was diseases. There was no antibiotics.
They'd wipe out half of the population of the world in one hit.
Absolutely. And then you might die of war. The tribe next to you might come down. Whilst you're sleeping, they'll just throw a torch into your thing and just blow up or burn you, your wife, and your kid. Oh, it's getting pretty morbid. But that's exactly... I think that's what they would do.
They could, though. They could.
That's actually what it was, man. It seems like bizarre for us right now.
Mate, you watch Vikings?
I did watch Vikings. That's exactly what happened. It's 100% fact. But now we've actually solved those 3 things. The 3 biggest issues of people for pretty much all of human history, we've knocked out the park. We've got antibiotics. There's not much war going on relatively. There's not much famine. We're eating more than anything. Yeah. Drop back to the Atomic Habits episode. We're fucking fat as fuck. We're whales compared to what we used to be. So we've solved these 3 problems. So us humans, we've got so much energy now, money, we've got more resources than ever. What are we going to devote this to now?
Mate, you're getting me fired up. I think I probably was the victim of recency bias. We did this at the very, very, very start of the season. So I gave it 11 or 12. It probably deserves to be in my top 10 because it is vitally important stuff, man. We've solved famine. We've solved plague. We've mostly solved war. We're like firefighters in a world where there's no fire. We're just sitting around waiting to put out fires, but there's nothing happening. So what do we do next? What are the next things that we want to challenge? What are the next things that we want to fix? We're sort of waiting for the next thing to do, which I think is a sick element of this book, is thinking about what comes next.
100%. So Y and H, man, he wrote this book, I think, 2016, 2017 or something.
Yeah.
Quite prophetical because some of the things he wrote about are coming to fruition now. But the thing we're focusing on now, he says throughout the book, is immortality, happiness, and divinity. So those 3 things are becoming more and more prevalent. Looking at immortality, for example, genetic engineering wasn't a big thing then now, but right now I see it as equally as big as anything that's going to impact the human race over the next few generations.
Yeah, we're trying to solve that. We're trying to live forever. He says happiness. We used to have the right to the pursuit of happiness. But he said we've almost confused that with the right to happiness. So rather than just trying to pursue happiness, we just all think we should be always happy all the time and not have to work for it.
Yeah, pop a few pingers. Is that what he's referring to?
I don't think so. But and then the other thing is divinity. No, keep it in. And then divinity. That's where the title comes from. Homo Deus. Us humans, we could be the next gods. That's what we think anyway.
So number 4 for you was ego is the enemy.
Yeah.
Interesting one. When I first read it, I was thinking, this is a piece of shit book. Then I did the notes and I thought, this is a pretty good book. Then I did the episode and I'm like, this is a fucking sick book. Right?
Yeah. Mate, you've
got
got it
the 3 run-throughs. I think it's a really good book as well now.
It is. It's good, mate. You had it at number 9. I remember I was like, this is almost a 10 for me. Like, this is a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 for me. You're like, this is a 3 out of 10 for me. We did the notes. You're like, oh, yeah, no, maybe it's like a 5 or a 6. We did the app, then it's like a 7 or an 8. It just keeps climbing and climbing. Mate, I said to you, I think Ryan Holiday's...
I'll give you an update after this little spiel with you.
I think Ryan Holiday is probably my number 3 author. Like, I've got Seth at the top, Robert Greene probably tied for first, and then Ryan Holiday's next on the list. This book was all about the ego. He talked about how our opinions of ourselves really affect us and really limit what we've got. And it affects us in all elements of life. It affects us in the things that we aspire to. It affects us when we achieve success, and it affects us when we achieve failure.
Yeah, so there's 3 different periods that we're all going through. Everyone's going through a different period right now. So first of all, it's aspire, and then you might be going through a period of success, and you might be going through a period of failure. It's one of the 3, really. When it comes to all of the 3, ego is the enemy in every single case.
Basically, with aspiration, when you are aspiring, when you're trying to achieve something, if you add ego to the mix, you basically stretch yourself too far. You expect too much, you strive too far, you assume that you're already deserving of it. And so this ego, when you're aspiring, really fucks you up.
Yeah, man. I think this aspire thing's a really big one. There's some people in my life who, because what we do, like the podcast, we're getting some traction there. Some people don't see any success at all that we're doing. They see me. I used to do Uber driving about 4 years ago. They see me as the Uber driver still and all that kind of stuff. So when I'm around those people, I go back to aspire mode and I try and just talk about all the shit I'm doing to make them think I'm successful, right? And I know the ego, after reading this shit, I'm like, fuck, I've got to stop doing that because ego is the enemy in there, right? Are you a bit of the same? Like the people who... I think I go through different periods. Like it's aspire mode. It's probably all aspire mode, really. Success mode, I'm not too worried about because around those people, I don't have as much ego.
Yeah, mate, I've got something to... mate, I can't talk too much specifically about it and don't mention it. But
don't mention it. There's people listening.
I'll mention it, but nobody tell... Anyway, there's a TV show that I really like.
Oh, no.
If anyone's been listening for a while, you probably know. And
Survivor?
Mate, don't mention it. Oh. Don't mention it. But I was talking about how ego really is like the gap between potential and ability. So I see myself, mate, so I see myself as having extremely, extremely high potential. And so I've got a very high opinion of myself. I see myself with very high potential. Current ability is much lower than that potential. But what fills in the gap is ego. So I'd say I've made a lot of bad decisions in the past based on ego because I think that my current ability matches my potential. And so the ego really has bumped up my current ability to think I'm at the level of potential. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we, before we recorded, your IQ, because you are objectively in the top ridiculous percentage.
0.034%, yeah.
Well, exactly. There's the ego coming out again, mate.
That's it. Mate, if you put 3,000 people in a room, I'm the smartest.
Yeah. But at the same time, IQ is an opportunity, but it is also, like you were saying there, it's a curse as well because you might every now and then see the chink of the armor being your IQ being so high that you don't do the work.
Definitely.
Or you do fucking work.
No, but in some cases for sure.
But I'd say it's very hard to articulate because you are a very humble person, but at the same time, you understand that your IQ is so high that you might not see, I don't know, the path was...
No.
What am I trying to say, Ashton?
Humble exterior, but to myself, not humble. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very high opinion of myself. Definitely agree with that. And
I've seen that come up a few times when I try and duke it out with you with something because I see myself as more of a intuitive, creative brain and you're more of a rational brain. And there's sometimes where it's more a intuition kind of thing that isn't very hard to articulate. That's you don't respect the intuition. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
I can see that.
Or you're trying to do a Machiavellian IQ thing on me.
I'm not. It's very true, mate. We're getting very, very deep here. But I think even like as a teaser, we just reread Mindset by Carol Dweck. And obviously fixed mindset is bad, growth mindset is good. I think a lot of the times I think I've got a growth mindset, but I think the ego forces you into fixed mindset. I think the ego forces you into thinking that you're really, really good, that you already deserve this high level of success. But it's just the ego playing tricks on you. You haven't done any work yet. You haven't developed your skills yet. You're still at a low level of current ability.
I don't think there's anyone measuring fixed versus growth mindset, but if there was a measure of that, compare that to IQ. I think you agree with this. And you do have a growth mindset, which is a good thing. But I think the growth mindset is, mate, it's 10x IQ measurement.
Yeah, mate, I think having reread Mindset just this week, very recently, the episode coming soon, obviously, is that I think whilst I think I have a growth mindset, that's almost a fixed mindset thing to think you've got a growth mindset. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, I see what you're saying. But I think we'll move on. I think
this is like just a psychology session.
I think you got a growth mindset, and I think any of the good shit that's happened to you that show, it's because of the growth mindset, not your IQ. And I think you don't understand that it's because of that. Not because I think your IQ does jack shit for you compared to what you think it does, compared to the growth side of things.
I'd agree with that. And that probably comes back to grit. Like talent is pretty meaningless. Effort is what's important.
Yeah.
So Grit's a good book. Ego's a good book. I really like Ryan Holiday. I really like Ego. I think I didn't like Obstacle is the Way that much when I read it. I feel like if I read it again, I'd like it a lot more. Anyway, basically, I'm a big Ryan Holiday fan now.
His books are very simple. You could just say in one sentence, but
you almost underestimate how good they are because they're very simple. Like he's got a lot of stories in there, but I think they're very, very profound.
Do a wee.
Okay, time for another piss.
I might do a wee upstairs this time.
Not outside. Okay, so after a toilet piss, not a backyard piss, we're up to our top three. Mate, my number 3 is still to come. So we'll hold off on that. Let's do your top 3 first.
So my number 3 is Collapse by Jared Diamond. I think he was an incredible author, man. I really do.
Mate, the issue with, for a bit of behind the scenes, so you read Collapse first, and you said Jared Diamond, he's just like Robert Greene. And I've got Robert Greene as my, an equal number 1. And so I think my high expectations led me to think less of the book.
Yeah, it's the Socko effect. If anyone's been around for a while, it's the Socko effect.
Tell us the Socko effect. We've made our own effect here.
Yeah, okay.
It's a cognitive bias that we've made up, which is good.
When I was in year 8, I used to have a mate, and we used to, he used to really try and get me into the music that he liked, and it was this rap music, and which is probably pretty bloody good music. But because he was sitting there trying to, he was looking at me as I was listening to the music. He goes, "How good's this, mate?" He's like looking at me. And it's just very hard to get into something when someone convinces you of how good it is beforehand. Mate, are we invented? Is there an equivalent of this effect?
I think it's just like high expectations really make you underappreciate it. I Socko affect my partner Al all the time when I try to get her to watch specific scenes of Survivor. And I'm like, Al, watch this. This is so good. Or if I tell her...
Survivor's shit. It's just, that's your issue you're dealing with.
I think anything where you tell somebody this is like a 10 out of 10, this is A+, this is phenomenal, the expectations are too high to appreciate it. You got to bring them in with low expectations. So that's the Socko effect. So I got Sockoed for Collapse, whereas you said this is like Robert Greene. I was expecting Laws of Human Nature, 48 Laws of Power, and it gave me Collapse instead. Which it's probably like a 9. It's probably like a 9 out of 10 compared to a 10 out of 10. But I was expecting a 12 out of 10, so I gave it a 3.
Well, hopefully, Guns, Germs, and Steel. I might reverse Socko you.
Yeah, reverse Socko. We've also invented the reverse Socko effect. We bring extremely low expectations, where you say this book is shit, and inevitably the other person says, "No, what are you talking about? This is a great book."
It's a tactic.
Please
now.
Reverse Socko me, please.
We've genuinely made this tactic between us now when we talk about books. But anyway, Collapse, man, I think it's quite profound because if you look at throughout generations and generations and thousands of years, there actually is civilizations in the past that have collapsed. It's, if you say it as like a surface level thing, it's not a very big deal. But there's people like me and you, Ashto, who've been part of civilizations that have just gone...
You think of entire groups. Some groups in history are still alive today. Some groups of history have completely disappeared for some reason or other.
So it begs the question, like, are we going to go through the same kind of thing? I think some people are quite cults-like, for lack of a better of a drunk word, but very fixed on one thing or the other. It's like all those environmentalists, leftists, they're all losers and they're climate extremists, or the people on the right saying we're going to do it forever and it's fine. But who knows what it is. But I think a great example was Easter Island. So at one stage when humans first settled there was a lot of resources there for the people who went there. And over time, they grew quite a complex civilization. So there was 12 different parts of the island, and they all owned one different kind of resource. So one part of the island was all of the food and the fishing source. One part of the island was all the stone and the tool making and so forth. So it was a complex society. And in some ways, the analogy is quite similar to what we are today. We rely on trade between different parts of the world. But one of the things they all objectively agreed on was status. So one part of the island started building statues, and other part of the island said, hey, look, we can build bigger statues than you. And this kept going on, and they started spending a lot more resources relatively on building statues. Eventually got to the point where they built statues upon statues, balancing on the statue's nose, and started getting ridiculous. So there would have been hundreds of people carrying these statues by wooden pieces of log to build the leverage to build these ridiculous statues, meaning they don't have the technology that we have today.
Yeah. Well, what happened, if you think about it, is like, so what there was I can't even give you the actual names of them. I can't see straight at the moment, but there was the base. There was a big base which held the statue, and then they started building the statues. If you think of Easter Island, you can imagine those very, very big heads, those statues, and then they started building like headdresses, feather caps on top. There was basically everyone was trying to one up each other. If you think of if you apply it to the corporate world, you think, okay, these guys have done. They've done 90, we're going to go 95. Basically, they've got this massive statue. We're going to build a massive statue, but then put a bloody feather on top of it.
I don't think it's the corporate world, man. I think it's like...
everything.
Well, I say between me, me personally right now with mates, if I see I'm just still driving a piece of shit car because I'm trying to avoid the head-on adaptation. Anyone can buy a
what about
car.
what about the leather bag that you bought in Canada?
Let's not go there, mate. I bought a $500 bag. It's probably over the top. It's a similar. Oh, it's exactly this,
mate,
right?
It is this.
It's like purely status. It's like buying the biggest shit so you look better than your competitors. And this is what it led to for Easter Island. For them, it meant you need to use more and more resources to build the bigger and bigger stone statues. And when they first entered the island, they used these wooden resources to go out and hunt bigger and bigger fish as their food source. They get beautiful dolphin meat. And over time, that resource was diverted to building bigger and bigger statues. And over time, they ran out of wooden resources. So it was a treeless island, if you look at it right now. And because of that, they couldn't go out and then hunt their bigger and bigger fish. And over time, they reverted to cannibalism. And this was a common thing for, we're talking about Easter Island now, but there was a lot of different societies and civilizations in the past. And that was the reason they went down.
Yeah, I really liked part 4, chapter 14. I had to slog through the first 13 chapters, imagining it was Robert Greene. And I finally got to chapter 14, 550 pages in. It was a fucking massive book where I really liked where they said, look, there's some reasons that some societies make disastrous decisions. So maybe they fail to anticipate the problem before it arises. Maybe if they anticipate the problem, they actually got it wrong. Maybe even if they know what's coming, they fail to act. So there are all these reasons why a society could collapse, why a business in 2020 could collapse. There are all these reasons that some things could go wrong based on this, which I thought were really good practical lessons.
So it's a very good book, man. Number 3 for you, it's a bit of a hold.
Yeah, hold for that. So my number 2 is Unscripted by MJ DeMarco. Now, back in season 2, at the start of season 2, we did MJ DeMarco, The Millionaire Fastlane. We interviewed MJ. Even before that, before we started the podcast, I read Millionaire Fastlane probably a year and a half before we started the podcast. And it really opened my eyes in one sense, but it also fucked me up in another sense. In that...
we didn't interview him.
We did. Yeah, we interviewed him twice, yeah. We interviewed him twice.
I totally forgot.
So anyway, before the podcast, so I read Millionaire Fastlane and... probably bringing in some of this IQ, ego stuff that we're deep diving on.
You and the IQ. Before, I can tell when the IQ brain's coming out.
Anyway, it really made me a very, very bad employee. I thought, I'm just going to follow the fast lane. But my potential for the fast lane was not yet matched by my ability for the fast lane. But anyway, this book we did unscripted. It's a couple of years old, but I'd held off reading it. We finally read it. I really, really liked it. It's my number 2 from the last 6 months.
I think we should drop what the fast lane actually is relative to the other lanes.
Drop it.
All right, so there's 3 different lanes. You got the sidewalk, which is the pay it now culture. So this is the choice that everyone has, and a lot of people are doing this, where everything you earn goes to everything you spend, and it might tip into the direction of using your credit card to start spending your
probably
shit.
Fueled by credit. This could be the person who's on minimum wage who feels like they deserve more, so they get a credit card to spend more. Or it could be the NBA basketball superstar on $50 million a year who spends $60 million a year.
Yeah.
And so it's like the sidewalk is that you want everything now and you spend more than you earn.
And this is surprisingly common because it's can be difficult sometimes if your mate rocks up with a $40,000 car, no matter what they're earning, and you just rock up in your piece of shit car, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still rocking up my piece of shit car. I'm trying to
this
stick
car
to this.
analogy comes up a lot.
Well, after reading books, it's like something I'm trying to cling to because I know all the risks of
buying a new car.
the dangers that are luring into you buying a better car just purely for the status reasons for this.
So that's the sidewalk. Now the slow lane, what the slow lane is, you're trading today for tomorrow. So the slow lane, you worked for 50 years, you save 10% of your income, you invest it in the stock market, it grows at 8% a year. And when you turn 70, you can retire, you've got $1 million in the bank, and you can live happily ever after. That's the slow lane. You're trading today, you're slaving away every single day today, but eventually you're going to be rich, but you're probably going to be old and rich.
And this is what a lot of books really sell, like your Barefoot Investor he talks about, or Ramit Sethi in Think and Grow Rich, or pretty much any personal... What did I say?
I think you meant I will teach you to be rich.
All right.
But yeah, similar.
And Ramit Sethi, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, or Robert Klassen.
George's Klassen.
Or George's Klassen, The Richest Man in Babylon. It's the idea that if you keep sacrificing a slice of what you're earning, over time, if you invest that, in 30, 40, 50 years, you're going to end up a millionaire and be rich. And I think this is the paradigm that most people go down. It's like these 2 different things. Avoid the sidewalk and instead go to this lane, which is MJ's going the slow lane. And for me personally, I feel like everybody just sees these as the only 2 options.
And it's true. If you invest like 10% of everything you earn, you invest in the stock market, it grows at an average rate over time. You do get rich, but you get old and rich. Contrast that, MJ says you can take the fast lane. Now that's getting rich quick. He says it's not getting rich easy. It's not following any get rich easy schemes where you just put money down and at the end you come out rich and you're happily ever after. Like you have to work for it, but you do get rich quicker than the slow lane.
Yeah, this is very possible, the fast lane roadmap, but at the same time, I think there's the most sharks lurking in this fast lane area more than anyone.
Oh yeah, think of what's his name, Greg Secker,
your mate who just fucked you up a little bit.
I got done.
You got done a little bit. You paid $5,000
for a foreign exchange trading course.
But like you didn't, and like everyone does, man. I've been there as well. I think everyone, when they get the sniff of this fast lane, they know that something might be real down there. At the same time, it's this belief in the silver bullet, which is the biggest risk. I think we've both gone through this journey, that the silver bullet, it doesn't exist, man. The quick and easy way to get loaded, Bitcoin, your network marketing, all that kind of shit. There's no such thing as a silver bullet. But at the same time, the upside is that get rich quick is possible, but get rich easy is impossible.
Yeah, that's it. We've interviewed MJ twice. The first time was very, very early. It was probably like our 10th interview and it was shit house. The second interview was a lot better, but he does say, look, get rich easy. If you're chasing that, you're chasing the wrong thing. You're looking for the silver bullet. You're looking for the shortcut. There's probably no shortcuts really. You still have to work really, really hard, but you can get rich quick. It's a matter of rather than making $1 million in savings over 50 years of your career, maybe if you build up a strong entrepreneurial business that's tapping into scarcity, that's tapping into opportunity, maybe you can make 10 million in 3 years, but you're going to work very hard to get it.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, and it probably is ridiculous even maybe in the 3 years if you're absolutely starting from scratch. But it comes from the mindset and the paradigm that understanding that the difficulty is the opportunity. And that's the hugest difference. There's the people who are the silver bullet chasers, they're avoiding difficulty. But for the people who are actually going to do well from everything, they're saying difficulty as the opportunity, because if you're solving something that's ultra difficult, you're creating a barrier to entry and a moat to whatever business opportunity that you're actually trying to make.
Yeah, if you think that you're going to go to work from 9 till 5, go home, watch some Netflix, eat a cheeseburger, go to sleep, you're on the slow lane. If you think that, okay, maybe you're going to have to work hard, but every night when you get home, you're going to have to put time into your business. You're going to have to be working extra hard, more than most people. Maybe rather than going out on a Friday night to the pub, maybe you're going to be working on your side business. Maybe rather than spending the weekend at the beach, you're going to be spending your weekend at your home office, toiling away, trying to build something. That's where the fast lane element of it comes in.
No, I think if I've got to describe a little bit of a sniff of the fast lane, it's about working for free.
Mate, this has come up a lot. I was hoping you'd mention this because, mate, you've mentioned this a hell of a lot. You've shoehorned it in.
Really?
Mate, I listened back to all of these 15 books that we mentioned, and, mate, you mentioned a lot. But it's good. It's good. Yeah.
Do you agree or disagree?
I agree.
I think as a starting paradigm, it's like, what would you work for free for?
Yes.
And if you come from the different paradigm, like, what are you going to work for money for? They're two different things. And if you got so much more resilience, if you think, what's the thing that I'm happy to just like churn out working for free that you could do for fucking years and years and years?
Yeah. Mate, if we look at this podcast, we're probably not quite on the fast lane yet, but we did do this for free for 3 years. Like we did this for even less than free. Like we were spending money every month to pay for hosting, to buy books, to put in the tens of hours a week. That's working for free. Yeah. Mate, one extra thing from the unscripted. This is a bit of bonus content for anyone who's listened to an hour of us rambling about shit half whacked on Johnny Red Label. In the past, it's been Johnny Blue Label for some reason.
Why are we on Johnny? Why are we going backwards?
I don't know why we're on the Johnny Red Label, but this is bonus content that didn't get into the initial unscripted episode. For some reason, I don't know how we missed it, but this is probably now my favorite chapter of unscripted, is the idea of luck. And MJ tells this story through the analogy of a gumball machine. So you can imagine a gumball machine. There's a whole bunch of gumballs in there. You put your 20 cents in, you spin the trigger, and out pops this gumball. You don't know what color of the gumball is going to come out. MJ says life is like a gumball machine, and there's only 3 colors in there. There's golden gumballs, which is the good stuff that happens to you. It could be that you get a promotion, you get a new job, you get a whole bunch of new customers, you sell your business. That's all the good stuff. There's the white gumballs, which is just neutral stuff, everyday, day-to-day things, not positive, not negative, just neutral. And then there's the red gumballs. It could be that you get made redundant, you get cancer, someone in your family dies. That's all the negative things. So what MJ says is that every day you're spinning that wheel, a different gumball pops out. You can't control what gumball pops out, but what you can control is what gumballs you put into the machine. So you can load that bad boy up with gold, or by doing nothing, you can load it up with red. If you're coming home every day and reading books and working on your side business and trying to improve yourself, going to Toastmasters courses, all of these things are adding gold gumballs into your machine. If you're coming home, sitting on the couch, watching Netflix, eating a pizza, then that's adding red gumballs into your machine. So basically what happens is you walk around the world And everybody just looks at the outcomes. Everybody just looks at, hey, you just spun and a gold one came out. You got so lucky. You sold your business for $10 million. You got a new sponsor for your podcast. You guys just got lucky. But what nobody else sees is what gumballs you're putting in at the very start.
I like it, man.
That's good. I don't know how we missed that. It's my favorite chapter of the book now.
Yeah, no, it's good shit. I think it could be spelled out as like just input in equals input out in 7 words, but it's not that simple though, right? It's like, I think you need a bit of a storytelling to get you to that point, because it's fucking true, man. Everyone just sees you spin the wheel and a gold one pops out and you got lucky, but nobody sees the 3 years of extra behind the scenes work that you put in. Yeah, I've absolutely gone through a bit of that journey, I think, man. All right, so number 2. We got to number 2.
Number 2 for you, number 3 for me.
Number 2 for me, 3 for you. Thinking Fast and Slow. So we're both very consensus. This is a fantastic book.
Fantastic book, mate. In the last 2 best of eps we've done, we excluded the redos from the ranking, but you convinced me that this one's just too good. We got to get it in. It's just too good that we have to put it in our top 10.
Yeah, partially that, man. Partially we've got a very new audience as well, I think.
Yeah, mate. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner for his work in the field of behavioral economics. It's a phenomenal book that really opens your eyes to just why do we do things without even realizing it.
I think starting from the assumption that humans are irrational is a very good thing to do for everybody. And if you start from that assumption, you realize that there's a lot of mental models to realize to save you from the risks of being irrational for all the different things that are going to pop up for you in your life.
Yeah. Thinking Fast and Slow from the title, fast thinking, slow thinking. So he calls them System 1 is fast thinking, System 2 is slow thinking. So System 1, the fast thinking, that's the instant reactions we have, the intuitive nature. Without even thinking, we just react to things. Something happens, we react. That's fast thinking. That's things like 2 + 2 = 4. We don't even have to think about it. We just know it. Compare that to slow thinking. That's the effortful thinking where we take time. Maybe if we're walking, we have to stop and think about it. That might be 12 times 17. We have to stop and think about it before we get to the answer.
I think your man, Scott Adams, in How to Fail at Everything Almost Went Big or whatever.
Yeah, it's a long title.
He was saying every one of these biases you don't understand is costing you money. And I actually genuinely believe this because these biases pop up all the time. One of them, for example, is anchors. Completely irrational. There's a few studies to back this up when I'm saying you have to listen to full episodes to understand it. But if you have something that anchors in a high number to the person you're speaking with, later, if you negotiate something for whatever it might be, will keep them closer to the higher anchor than it would be if it's not. Actually, that's quite confusing what has popped up.
I'll give you this study. So what they did was he rigged a wheel. You spin a wheel, it said from 1 to 100, you spin it. But he rigged it so it wasn't actually random. It either spun a 10 or a 65. So you either spin a 10 or you spin a 65. And then he asked, hey, what percentage of countries in the world are in Africa? Or what percentage of African nations are in the UN? And if you spun a 10, you actually said, well, about 25% of the world is in Africa. If you spun a 65, you said about 45% of the world is in Africa. So from this completely random, unrelated thing, just spinning a random wheel, it actually had an impact of like 80% in your guess of how many countries are in Africa.
Jesus. 1 second.
Crazy.
So that's one part of human irrationality. There's other things like availability bias, probability neglect, halo effects, I think we mentioned earlier. Planning failure is a really interesting one, I think. It's one thing that I've gone on a bit of a journey with, starting out as an engineer and just myself making predictions about how long some projects would take. And then over time, only in a few years' experience, I realised how bloody far off that I actually am. It's kind of a correlation. More unknowns there are in a project, the higher the planning fallacy is. And if there's more unknown unknowns, the greater amount you should be accounting for this uncertainty. And this is something, it's clear as day after reading a book like Thinking Fast and Slow, but at the same time, it's clearly not considered in planning for huge infrastructure projects that are going across the country. Like Melbourne Metro, for example, the Sydney Light Rail. They've been going on for years and years and years and years, and they're blowing out by billions of dollars and years of time.
There's a few examples he gave where like they surveyed homeowners who were about to renovate their kitchens, and on average they guessed that it was going to cost them $18,500 to rebuild their kitchen, but in actual fact it averaged $39,000, so more than double. And even in Kahneman, like Kahneman's the man who created this shit.
He's the fucking man.
You think he would know what's going on. When Kahneman and his team were tasked with creating a new textbook for a new subject at university, they said it's going to take us 2 years, and it actually took them 7. And so that's like the guy who actually knows this shit was still so far off.
Another one we fall into is the sunk cost fallacy. If you spend like $30 on a film, you go into the film, it's a piece of shit. If you understood the sunk cost fallacy, you look at the film and say, hey, this is a piece of shit, I'm fucking looking. But something to learn from. I'll tell you what, man.
I never walk out.
You never walk out?
I'm a full victim of the sunk cost fallacy.
I tell you, I won't be able to say the name of his exact rockets, but Elon Musk, right, like Starship, his new rocket he's putting up in the air, is the only rocket he's going to be putting up long term. He spent hundreds of millions into his other rockets that have gone up in the air and come back down and everything, but he's completely neglected the sunk cost fallacy, and he's choosing one rocket to be the whole future of SpaceX. He's obviously my hero, man. So,
mate, he's mastered the sunk cost fallacy. Most of us would think, I've already built this rocket for $40 million. Why would I waste it? But Elon's able to take a step back and think, this is not good enough. I'm going to go with the Starship. I like it. Mate, let's move on to our respective number ones. You take the first one.
Okay, man. So my number one book of this semester, using the analogy of...
We're going back to uni, are we?
is Anti-Fragile. I think it's a very big deal, this book. So taking the analogy a bit further, so you got something that's fragile, right? If you drop something that's fragile, it's going to break and shatter. If you got something that's robust, which is different, you're going to drop it and it's going to stay the same. If you got something that's anti-fragile, which he uses in this book, you're going to drop it and it's actually going to get better for the whole circumstance.
Crazy, mate. If you think about the world economy or everything that's happening around you, if change happens, if everything gets shaken up, if you break, you're fragile. If you remain the same, you're robust. But if you get stronger because of things changing, you're anti-fragile, which is obviously the desirable case. That's the thing you want to be. You don't want to be fragile. Robust is okay, but what you really want to be is anti-fragile.
So the way to think about it is like, what is going to happen to you when change comes? And the anti-fragile people are going to actually benefit from all this change. Okay, with a whole bunch of bullshit preamble, I think the biggest takeaway is the understanding that asymmetry plus rationality equals an option. Typically, in your day-to-day life, you're not going to be able to spot the options if you're following the whole entire herd. But every single day, everything you do, there are opportunities out there where there is very low risk thing that offers you very little downside, but the huge potential of absolute upside. And typically the difference is that these things with huge optionality, with big upside and little downside, the only difference being that they're very uncomfortable to do at some stages.
Mate, so Nassim Taleb, we did his first book, Black Swan. And Black Swan is like where something random happens, unexpected. It can either be really good or really bad. Anti-fragile is sort of building on that, where you're looking for the option. You're looking to do things that are uncomfortable, that are different, that if you put in enough effort towards something that nobody else is doing, you can actually get better when shit gets shaken up.
So I think in every day you got to think about what has positive asymmetry, things with very little risk, but has very big upside in what you might do.
Mate, you talked a lot about I remember at the very start of the season, all you could talk about was optionality, looking for the option. And I think it's a good idea. Like if you're looking to do things that provide you the most options, it's probably a good thing. If you do something and it closes you off to everything else that happens, and it shoots you down a narrow chute where you've only got one option. That's a bad thing. The more you do that opens up the most doors is a very good thing.
So in terms of finding optionality, say if you're working and it's 6 p.m. in the evening, you got two options. You can go to the networking event after work, or you can stay working on the same project you're doing. Optionality would say that there is very big upside but very little risk if you go to the networking event, and you might meet some people who spark the new line of interest that you might work on for the next few years.
Mate, another thing that he talked about was the idea that if you have only one boss and only one source of income, then you're very fragile. Say you're a banker working in the banking industry. You might have done very well to build up a long-term career. You've worked at the same place for 40 years. You've had the same boss for 40 years. You've had the same source of income for 40 years. But if the banking industry tanks like it did in the GFC, you're cooked. You're out. Your income goes to zero. Contrast to that to someone who's a consultant. Maybe they have 10 different bosses. They've got 10 different clients, 10 different sources of income. If one of them falls away, then they're still fine. They're actually anti-fragile in that maybe the others see an opportunity and he can actually increase his income while the rest of the economy is tanking.
I think it goes back to parenting as well. If you try and protect your children way too much, you might make them fragile. But if you let them have a little bit of failure, let them ingest a little bit of dirt along the way, let them come third, fourth or fifth, they're going to learn from those areas and be better for it, compared to the people who make them way too perfect from the very start, make them fragile, that any little bit of error in their life will make them much worse off for it.
Mate, he did talk a lot about that, like a lot about how, say, fasting, if you don't eat for 3 days, your body actually gets stronger. Or if you go to the gym and the change, like pushing up weights, your body the muscles tear a little bit in the short term, but in the long term, they get stronger. And he even says, like, if you drink like a little bit of poison each day, your body builds up an immunity to it. Mm-hmm. So like the anti-fragile comes from like doing things that are uncomfortable in the short term, but in the long term, you're building up, and you get stronger at the end.
Mate, I think we need to get into your number one.
My number one, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I really enjoyed reading this one, and I feel like it's a type of book that I could read once a year, every single year, and every year that I read it, I would learn something different, because I think each time I read it, I would read it as a different person. I would analyze a thing slightly differently. I would take on the lessons slightly differently, and every year I would improve.
I think the biggest deal about this book is that it was written in
180?
The first 100 or 200 centuries of the last 2,000 years. And if something can last that long, how the fuck does it last that long, right?
It's almost 2,000 years old, but it's still kicking. If it's 2,000
years old and it's still kicking, it has something that at the core, it relates to everyone in human nature.
Yeah, 100%. We strongly recommend, if you're going to buy this book, buy the Gregory Hayes translation. It's a black book with a red bird on the front.
I made the mistake.
You bought the wrong one. It was a piece of shit, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Couldn't even read it.
The first time I read it, I didn't like it, but then I read this translation of it and it was fantastic.
Yeah, this is a 10 out of 10 for me. One section, one paragraph, I guess, that sums up the whole thing. He says, discard your misperceptions, stop being jerked like a puppet, limit yourself to the present, understands what happens to you and to others, analyze what exists, break it all down, the materials and the causes, anticipate your final hours. And this is really, I guess, a summary of the entire book in like 6 sentences. What it is, it's this guy, Marcus Aurelius. He was like the king of the world at the time. It applies equally to the slaves as it does to the kings. It's like a way of living. Tim Ferriss, our mate, he calls it an operating system, how to operate in the world. Stoic philosophy. It's really just like the basic core level that everybody can take and apply to their lives.
I think one of the themes in the book that is very weird to speak about today is death. I think 95% of the population, if you talk about your own death, I did this once, so they got very weirded out. It's like I'm almost depressed or something because I was talking about how I fear my own death.
Mate, everybody's going to die. And Marcus takes it to the next level. He's like, think about when you kiss your son goodnight, think that he could be dead in the morning. Like, he goes extreme on the death.
It's true, man. He's going to die. your son, every fucking one you love is going to die at some stage. It's quite profound. And it's something I think in our culture that we always try and hide away from. Compared to like Eastern culture, when I was in India, death was very much to the surface that everyone accepted and agreed upon. Now it is thrown away to nursing homes and whatnot. And mate, it's wild. You're gonna die, Ashto.
I am.
You're gonna, mate. You're
Scary to
gonna.
think about.
There's one day there's gonna be nothing else of you left, and you're gonna be blank.
It's crazy. But it is vital to think about. If you meditate on your own death, if you realize that your time on this earth is limited, you're much less likely to waste it than somebody who thinks they're going to live forever.
Well, scarcity creates value. That's what Seth Godin would say. So once you realize that your time is limited, you'll understand that it's scarce. And because it's so scarce, that will be where the value is, and you'll start valuing your time at a different scale.
I think a big part of this book as well is he has two different buckets, and pretty much everything you do in life can be divided into two different buckets. One bucket is the things that you can control. The second bucket is the things that you can't control. Basically, if you can control it, then focus on that. Take ownership of it. Take responsibility. Be proactive. Do things to consciously and consistently change it. If you can't control it, you got to try to forget about it. You got to be humbled. You got to realize that it's inevitable. Realize that it's out of your control, and don't worry about it too much. And I feel like everything that we do in life, a lot of people are too worried and too focused on the things that they can't control, when what they should really be doing is just forgetting about those and only focusing purely on what they can control and what they can change.
So that's your number one, mate. We've gone from 10 to 1.
That's it. I want to read. I feel like every time I read this, I'm going to learn something new. I want to read it again soon.
Meditations,
yeah.
Do you think I just didn't get slapped up enough in the first read?
I think it was the Socko effect. Bring the Socko effects back in. I read this. I don't want to bring this in because you hang shit on me, but I read this when I was in Thailand in the middle of the year when we had our break.
In the middle of the mass.
And, mate, it had a fucking profound effect on me. So I feel like I said, mate, this is a 10 out of 10. This is my favourite book of the whole year. And since then, you dropped it lower.
I'd agree. I think I was Socko affected by it.
You
didn't say
that's
anything.
My fault. I apologise to you for Socko affecting you. People who are listening might realise, I know it's been a long rambly, we're getting more and more drunk as the episode goes on, but they'll probably realise that your number one wasn't in my top 10 at all, and my number one wasn't in your top 10 at all. Mate, that's bizarre.
What's going on?
It is truly bizarre. We did these completely autonomously. We did them without even looking at each other's things, and that's just how it happened.
I think we define a book differently, which has got higher value. But I think what's exciting for both of us, man, is that I think most people, when they start reading, they think they're going to max out at 10 books, diminish returns. But for me, I'm still fucking loving books, man. There's so many books that I read, even now, 200 books in, that I'm learning things that I've never heard of before. I think it came up from a book recently. I'm too drunk to remember, but it's like as the size of your island grows, the shore of your ignorance decreases.
Increases.
Yeah, increases.
Mate, that was from Ego is the Enemy, which you didn't fucking have in your top 10, which deserved to be in there.
Yeah, probably deserved to be.
No, it was your number 9. I apologize.
But do you agree with the general principle that the more you read, it's actually, you're not going to have the diminishing returns?
It's like the more you learn, the more you still realize that you still have to learn beyond that as well.
And I think in this podcast, it's like the difference between me and you is like, you may or may not agree, but my role is more the exploratory role of learning new books that we haven't really covered in the podcast yet. And your role is more the solidifying style.
Well, if you look at your top 4, 3 of your top 4 did not feature in my top 10.
And I think
which
that's
is
the
pretty
biggest
wild,
difference.
man. Which is pretty wild. I'd say Homo Deus, Anti-Fragile. They were in your top 4. They'd probably be my number 11, number 12. Collapse a bit lower down. So yeah, I'd agree with the statement you just made. I think for me, it's more like which is just like information, which is intellectual masturbation, which is like learning cool shit for cool shit's sake versus what is actionable, what's applicable.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest difference. Like my intellectual masturbation quotient isn't as big as for you. If I get slapped up with a new insight that I've never heard of before, and it's only $25 and 8 hours to get to that insight, then that's ridiculously high value. And that's what I got from like a Homo Deus and Anti-Fragile.
Yeah, for me, it's probably more like what's like immediately applicable today. What can I apply to my life or my business or my work or whatever it is? What can I apply right now that I've learned something brand new that's going to make an impact? Like say grit, which for me was like, hey, if you like put in more effort over more time and you stick to things that you commit to.
Mate, you didn't learn anything new in the first time you read that. You heard that before.
But grit, I feel like it's more like, hey, if you put in effort, you're going to get better. If you put in effort, your talent multiplied by effort is your skill multiplied by effort is your achievement.
I do love that. You looked
like
at
that
me
sort
and
of
said,
stuff.
Yeah, I do agree with that. That's good shit.
So like that sort of stuff, I probably rate that more than like collapse, where it's like the Easter Island from 1200 years ago collapsed.
So for those who haven't listened to one of our drunk episodes, we really thank you for listening this far. I hope it's been a lot of value for you listening. As we said at the start, man, it was all about helping a few people, and I think over time it's really grown. And a few random people who have been messaging us is like that's a fucking big deal for us.
Hey, we really appreciate it. As we said at the start, we like looking at the download numbers ticking up, but more important than just those raw numbers is, I guess, the human side of it, the personal side of it, of just sending us a message or leaving us a review, saying what you enjoyed and how you've helped us. As a teaser for anyone who's listened to fucking 70 minutes into this long drunk rambling episode, coming up in January, we've got Mastery by Robert Greene, which is... I think it's almost a lock for my number one for the best of 20, the best of season 4. So pretty much that's a spoiler.
Everyone's got to listen to that.
Yeah, that's going to be a lock. It's such a big book that we've broken into 3 parts. We're redoing Mindset by Carol Dweck. We're doing The Power of Habit. We're doing Emotional Intelligence. We're doing Principles by Ray Dalio. These are all the things that are coming up in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
January is going to be insane.
You wanted to call it Juggernaut Month again, but we've already got Juggernaut Month.
Well, it's bigger
What's
than
it called?
any...
What do you want to call it? We're drunk now. Call it something.
Launch
Month. Launch month. January 2020. These are going to be some big books.
Well, it's bigger than any fucking month we've had.
It's a big month coming up. So thanks to everyone who's listened so far to this episode and to the 230 odd episodes we've done so far. There's some serious heavy hitters still to come.
Should we sing the song?
Out of our people who submitted questions, this is our favorite one so far.
Mates, love the fucking songs. Keep it up.